It was a beautiful sunset. The sun shone on the horizon and turned the sky and clouds into an incredible kaleidoscope of orange and purple hues. Temperatures were warm, about what you'd expect to find in Southern California. It was Saturday evening, and for this occasion, we had a weekly gathering with friends. Among those gathered were friends whom my wife and I have known for 20 years. More precisely, she has known them a little longer. Today, we gathered at Scott and Andrea's house. Scott owned several fast food franchises, which was ironic since he never touched the food himself. He was something of a health nut. He got involved in this industry as an investment opportunity, and it turned out to be very successful. He spent most of his time doing surprise checks, looking for other business opportunities, and managing his investment account. Andrea worked as a receptionist at a local primary school, although mostly just to have something to do. They had 2 children, Holly, who was 15, and Matthew, who was 13. Bill was the vice president of a local sporting goods supply company. He played college baseball and had every chance of becoming a professional until an accident injured his knee and ended his career. He'll tell you it was fate because it led him to work as a salesman for the same company he works for now, and that's where he met his wife Lisa. She works there in the accounting department. They have only one daughter, Tasha. She is 14 years old. John owns several car dealerships in the city. He makes good money. His wife, Marcy, was a homemaker and mother until she passed away from cancer just over a year ago. She was only 41 years old. They have a daughter, Savannah, who is 21 and studying at university. My name is Henry. I am a master electrician, but currently I work as a project manager for a large contracting company and make very good money, 6 figures per year. My wife, Gina, is also a stay-at-home mom. We have an 18-year-old daughter, Natalie, who recently joined Savannah at university, and since she is a freshman and Savannah is a senior, they rarely see each other on the big campus. We have all known each other for many years, and we use these weekly meetings to keep in touch. In fact, everyone except me knew each other in college, and I met my wife and then her friends shortly after they graduated from college. That we all managed to stay in the area and remain successful was fortunate. Taking a break from the sunset, I pay attention to where everyone is. My wife chats with John at the patio table, Scott and Bill man the grill, and Andrea and Lisa are inside preparing the sides. I've been enjoying these types of events for a long time. There are few things better than a relaxing evening spent with the wife you love, food you enjoy, and longtime friends. Of course, Marcy's death last year left a mark on these meetings. Something was missing. And I mean all of us, not just John. For a while, he stopped attending the meetings. The pain of seeing the remaining couples reminded him of what he had lost. But eventually he came back to us as we tried to make sure he couldn't just leave from the circle. The guys were constantly trying to get him to join us fishing, golfing, or whatever, and the ladies were always getting him to go out and do the shopping and cooking for him. Otherwise, he would probably just be eating, coincidentally, fast food from one of Scott's places. John and Gina were talking quietly, occasionally glancing in my direction. At the time, I didn't think it was strange, but looking back, I was awakened in the most pleasant way possible, at least I think so. We showered together like we usually did on weekends, and then I got dressed and went to the garage to start working on my car while Gina did all the housework. I usually spend Sunday morning working on the car. My current project is a 1965 Chevy Malibu SS Coupe. I bought it 2 years ago after it was found in a barn that was falling apart. It was in a terrible state, but I almost got it in order. I like the original look better. I know a guy who is into Mustangs, but he tends to focus on the newer models and put all sorts of aftermarket parts on them. Huge brakes and spoilers, superchargers, etc. To such an extent to the point that it's hardly a Mustang. Sure, they look good, but it looks more like a Franken Mustang or something. I sometimes see it at car shows. He has disdain for GM products, but we can both appreciate the work the other does. Honey, before you go to the garage, I'd like to talk about something. I simply shrugged my shoulders in agreement, and we sat down at the kitchen table. Communication was one of our strengths, and such conversations were common. I did not think about that, but this conversation could radically change the course of my life. Well, how are things with the car? Everything goes well. I finally got it working. There are a few interior pieces that I'm still trying to find, but I have enough stuff I can put out to keep me occupied for most of the morning. What do you have planned for today? Oh, the usual, a load of laundry, a little weeding in the garden, and maybe a little dusting. Now that Natalie has left home, there is not much to do. So, what do we need to talk about? Well, as you've probably noticed, John has begun to come out of his shell over the last few months. The ladies and I tried very hard to get him to think about dating again. He's still young, and we think Marcy would want him to be happy. I agree, I admitted. As much as she and Marcy love each other, I can't imagine that she would want him to be alone for the rest of his life. Exactly. And last night, he finally said he was ready to get back into a relationship. Good for him. It will do him good to get back on the horse. Does he have any prospects? Here Gina hesitated a little, and I will soon find out why. Well, in fact, there is one particular woman who interests him very much. He has known her for some time and has very strong feelings for her. Is this one of our friends? The thing is, honey, well, it's me. What do you mean, it's you? John wants to be with you. Yes, he told me last night. Not fully understanding the seriousness of what she was saying, my first reaction was mild. Well, I can understand that. You are a beautiful, smart, sexy woman. It's a shame you're unavailable. At this point, her eyes no longer met mine, and I became acutely aware that she did not agree with my statement about her availability. Suddenly, it dawned on me. Ah, got it. The point of this conversation is to let me know that you are, in fact, making yourself available to him. You want a divorce? She looked up at me, for some reason shocked by this assumption. No, Henry, I don't want a divorce. I want to be married to you for the rest of my life. Then what's going on? Gina, you're clearly trying to tell me something I don't want to hear, and it clearly has something to do with you making yourself available to John. Just tell me what you mean, please? Henry, please calm down. Let me break it down for you, okay? I sat back in my chair and wondered what was going to happen. I had already decided that our morning romp was intended to soften me for what was about to happen. Henry, as you know, all of us, with the exception of you, met in college. It started with 4 of us girls. Andrea first met Scott at a party during her sophomore year, and then she introduced Bill to her roommate. It was Lisa, of course. In between, I met John during one of my English classes. He was a good writer, and I was struggling, so he tutored me and helped me improve my grade. What you didn't know is that we started dating. So you dated John before Marcy. Why was I never told about this? I'll get to that, I promise. So, like I said, John and I started dating, and we were very much in love. We even talked about marriage. But one evening we were together, and I think we drank too much. As a result, John and Marcy slept together. I was, of course, furious when I found out about this, but they apologized and seemed very sincere. It was just a mistake, they said, and it would never happen again. I took a risk and decided to forgive them, and everything was fine. Until Marcy found herself pregnant with Savannah. I watched Gina's eyes moisten as she told the story. On the one hand, I felt sorry for her, but on the other hand, I was furious that these details were hidden from me. She continued, after much mental anguish and conversations with his parents and pastor, John decided to do the honorable thing and asked Marcy to marry him, and she agreed. Of course, I was devastated, but I understood. This rocked our relationship, but we somehow managed to remain friends, although at first we were a little distant from each other. Everything went as usual. We graduated from college, and then I met you. You and I fell in love, and over time, John and Marcy fell in love with each other too. As a group, We decided to hide my relationship with John from you, fearing that it would ruin your friendship with him. We all expected that we would all be happily married into old age and probably die one after the other. Naive, of course, but that's exactly how we felt. So if Marcy hadn't gotten sick, all this would have remained hidden in the deep, dark corners of your minds, and the brat Henry would have remained in the dark. Henry, don't talk about yourself like that. You're not a brat. Everything was as it was, and it was all over. He was happy with Marcy, and I was happy with you. So you're not happy with me anymore, huh? Not at all, honey. Now I'm happier with you than ever before. I love you, and I hope our morning today showed that to you. So this was part of some plan to prepare me for what you want to tell me? Very nice. No, dear. This was to let you know that I love you. That's all. Okay, so you and John loved each other and then married other people. What does this have to do with today, and, more importantly, with you and me? If you don't want a divorce, then what are we talking about? Gina stood up from the table and walked over to the kitchen window, looking out over the yard we had carefully maintained since we moved into this house 10 years ago. I couldn't understand where this would lead. Was she going to ask permission to have an affair? And if not, then what? Gina, waiting won't make it any easier. Could you just tell me what you're talking about? Okay, Henry. I was wondering how you would feel about, well, sharing me with him. I became furious. I stood up so quickly that the chair I was sitting on not only fell back, but also rolled across the floor and crashed into the closet. Gina flinched in surprise. Share you with him. So this means that you are having an affair with him. No, Henry. Well, not really, no. Please calm down so I can explain everything. You're scaring me. You know what, Gina? I can't calm down now. I'm going to go away for a while to calm down, and maybe we can continue this later. But now, I need to get away from you. I took the keys and went to the garage. The Malibu was jacked up, so I was in my pickup truck. I turned on the radio and, burning rubber, rushed away from the house. I still didn't know what exactly she was offering. She said that this is not a divorce, not an affair, but it implies living together with him. I knew that when it came to my wife, I couldn't divide her. She was either completely mine or not mine at all. I guess we'll soon know which direction to go. I drove past John's apartment building and saw his Mercedes parked right in front of the house. He moved into this apartment shortly after Marcy died. The house they shared had too many memories of her, and it had been too empty since Marcy left and Savannah went off to college. I probably would have done the same. The anger I felt towards Gina for even thinking and suggesting it was replaced by anger at John for his part in this. But then I realized that I don't know all this. Perhaps it was Gina's idea and she was trying to get my consent before telling him. I needed more answers. Gina, things didn't go the way I hoped. I thought it was unrealistic to think that Henry would be willing to let me spend time with John, and I was right. In the morning, I woke him up in a special way so he knew I loved him no matter what, and we had a great time. But I was torn. I loved John first, even before I met Henry, and those feelings continued unabated. Perhaps it was because we all remained friends and saw each other all the time. Perhaps if John and I had not communicated for years, my love for him would have faded, but I still feel awe when I see him. But I never thought he felt the same way until last night. Andrea, Lisa, and I encouraged him to start dating again. He was still young, only 42 years old, and we knew that he did not want to spend the rest of his life alone. We gave him what we thought was a reasonable amount of time to grieve Marcy's death, and then we started asking him to start dating. We didn't think he would find someone to marry right away. We just thought he needed to get back on track with his life. He resisted the idea, not because he wasn't ready to date, but because he simply couldn't imagine finding someone else to love as much as Marcy did. We constantly encouraged him and told him that he didn't have to love her that much, he just had to love her and let her love him. But last night at a barbecue, he took it out on me. When he said that he couldn't imagine finding anyone else to love so much, he meant that there was already one woman whom he loved so much, but he didn't believe there could be a third. That other woman, of course, was me. He admitted that he had always loved me, and said that even more than Marcy. He still thought he had done the right thing by marrying her, but he died a little every time he saw Henry and me together. "It's been a long 20 years, he said. Without even thinking about it, I admitted my feelings for him and that I had never stopped loving him. But I told him that I loved Henry too and didn't want to hurt him. I thought that John was inviting me to have some kind of affair, but I wouldn't do it. But this was not what he wanted. He asked if I was truly happily married, and I said yes. He told me again how much he loved me and how he wanted us to be together forever. He wanted me to divorce Henry and marry him so we could be together for the rest of our lives. I told him that I couldn't do this, but for some reason the thought of living together arose in my head. I've heard stories about people living double lives. They have families in 2 different cities, and they tell each family that they have to travel a lot for work, when in fact they travel back and forth between families. But the fact is that no matter what family they are in, they give themselves completely. They love their wife or husband, play with children if they have them, and take an active part in their lives, making sincere love with them. They just love both women or men and do not want to live without them. For me, this doesn't quite fit. I don't work, so I can't justify leaving, even for a couple of days. The only thing that would work would be to be completely honest. I suggested the idea to John, and although he wasn't crazy about the part-time idea, he understood that I was trying to make it work and that he would welcome any time with me that I was willing to give him. But he told me he didn't think Henry would agree to it. I realized that he was probably right. After all, a man will have to voluntarily share his wife with another man. Oh, I knew about those patients who are addicted to this, but I considered them more animals than people. One thing that separates humans from beasts is the level of emotion and devotion what man would willingly give the woman he supposedly loves to someone else. This meant that I might have to make a choice. Would I be able to leave Henry, the man I loved for 20 years and who knew me, my desires, aspirations, and dreams better than anyone else, to be with someone who, despite all the years I knew him and loved, was unknown in terms of relationships? But the thing is, there was always some part of me that was missing. When John and I were together, we just fit together. We talked about hopes, dreams, and our life together. Then I looked forward to this time coming. But all this was lost the moment Marcy became pregnant. I was heartbroken to see him marry someone else, and it took me a long time to come to terms with it. In fact, I wasn't even sure that was the case. But now, I had a chance to fulfill the dream I dreamed of 2 decades ago. Marcy is no more, God rest her soul, and John still wants to be with me. Could I have missed the opportunity to fill a part of me that has been missing all these years? I didn't know if I could. Henry. When I finally returned to the house, it was almost dinner time. Mostly I just drove around the area. I stopped for lunch, but for some reason I tried to avoid Scott's establishments. Somehow, in my mind, he had some kind of guilt and responsibility here, and he didn't get my $5. This will show him. Gina had something boiling on the stove. She came up to me and tried to hug me, but I held her back. Henry, not until I find out what exactly you need. I'm calm enough to listen now, but no more beating around the bush. Tell me exactly what you're after and do it quickly. This is not a divorce or an affair. That's what you said. Then what is this? What did you mean by sharing you? I want you to understand, Henry, that I love you very much. But I also love John. I loved him then, and I still don't stop now. I was able to deal with this for 20 years and commit myself to you because we were all happily married and I was absolutely faithful the entire time. But you have to understand that before you and I met, I always imagined myself married to John. I planned our future together, and when it didn't happen, I felt inadequate, like a part of me had been taken away from me. Get to the point, Gina. Okay. I propose that I live with John as husband and wife, part-time. The rest of the time, I would live with you. Specific details, of course, will need to be worked out. When she finally voiced her idea, I felt like a big pit was growing in my stomach. An affair would have been bad enough, but this was even worse, assuming she meant what she seemed to mean. So, for example, 1 week you will live with him and the other with me. Something like that. The pain was obvious in my voice. All the rudeness and anger with which I entered the house disappeared, and they were replaced by sadness and pain. I think she realized it too, judging by the look on her face. Well, as I said, we will need to work out the details. This is, of course, one option, although I would insist that you spend most of your time with me. This seems fair. This last phrase was added, I think, to assure me that I would still be the first husband. And I assume that when you say live as husband and wife, you mean sex too. Well, yes. This is part of love, and we would like to express it. I was desperately trying to understand what she was hinting at. I was killing time by asking follow-up questions, which she thought meant I was really thinking about it. I knew there was no way I would share it, no matter what that meant, but I needed to gather my courage before talking about it. Where will we live when this happens? Will you stay in the house while John and I come and go? Or are you going to go back and forth between us like in some weird custody agreement? Well, again, Henry, these are details that will need to be worked out. We could, of course, decide which is better. What do you think? John agrees with this idea. So he knows. Was this your idea? Well, it was a kind of brainstorming. He said he'd like to be with me. I said it's a shame you guys can't share me. He said he's ready. And it just went from there. Of course he is ready. He went from none of you to some of you. Why shouldn't he be prepared? He gets a mistress who doesn't require a lot of time. This is beneficial for him. I'm not a mistress, Henry. He loves me and I love him. What if I refuse? What do you mean? What if I say no? I won't share you with John. What will happen then? Well, I guess I'd have to choose. I knew exactly what that meant. This simple statement ended my marriage because if she had any intention of staying with me, she would have said something like, I'll just tell John it won't happen. The fact that she framed it as a choice meant that she was simply trying to find a way to pity me so that I would give in easily. It's clear, okay? I think that says it all. I'll find a place to stay tonight and find a lawyer in the morning. I went out into the garage, and suddenly the sun didn't seem so bright. I lost the desire to work in Malibu. I didn't intend to live here any longer than I had to, and I was taking the car with me, so at some point I'll need to get it ready to move. We could sell the house, or they could buy my share of it, but I wouldn't live here. I knew that Gina had never suggested that my assumption was wrong. On some level, she knew she would choose John if it came down to it. So when I said no, the choice was already made. I went to our bedroom and started packing enough clothes for a few days. As I hauled my suitcase to my truck, Gina was still sitting at the kitchen table. She lowered her head and looked into her coffee, making no attempt to stop me. It seemed significant to me that I shed tears over this, but she never cried. This indicated that she was not very upset by my leaving. Damn it, she had my replacement, the man she really wanted, all lined up, so why should she be sad? How empty those 20 years were. I walked out the door, but Gina still didn't move or say anything. I climbed into my pickup truck and headed across town to Motel 6. It was inexpensive, and all I needed was a bed. In the next few days, I'll be moving into more permanent living. I drove past John's house again without thinking about it, although this time my feelings were completely different than the first time, because now I knew that he was aware of what was happening. There were still no suspects as to who may have thrown that rather large rock at his windshield late that evening. John. When I found my broken windshield, I immediately knew who did it, but I kept it a secret. Even if I could prove it, which ultimately I couldn't, I would never turn Henry in, especially given the circumstances. I know that Gina planned to talk to him about our conversation, so his reaction was not only understandable, but also expected. I didn't feel comfortable, really, but I loved Gina for many years, longer than I loved Marcy. Perhaps I loved her even more than Marcy, and I loved Marcy very much. When the ladies started talking to me about returning to the circle of acquaintances, even just diving headfirst, I didn't want to. I was beginning to emerge from the period of mourning for Marcy, but the thought of another woman was difficult to wrap my head around. I truly loved two women in my life and couldn't imagine there would be another to fill their place. Since Gina and I were still friends and saw each other regularly, I just knew that whoever I was with would be constantly competing just by being around Gina, and Gina would win every time. In fact, I confessed my constant love for Gina to her alone. I did not include Andrea or Lisa in this conversation for what I thought were obvious reasons. I was very surprised when she told me that she still loved me. I'm ashamed to admit that when I heard this, my thoughts about caring for my friend's feelings took a back seat to my hopes that maybe Gina could finally be mine. I didn't want to hurt Henry, but to be with. I wanted Gina even more. I asked if she was truly happily married, and she said yes. I expressed my wish that she would leave Henry and be with me. I'm sure part of her wanted it, but she loved him and was devoted to him. It was actually her idea, which I think she said half-jokingly, that it was a pity that Henry and I couldn't share it, like those people who live two lives in two different cities with two different families. I think I surprised her when I said I didn't mind. After all, having her a couple of days a week was better than nothing. This got her thinking that maybe it would work, if only she could explain it correctly. I told her that Henry would never agree to share something that was exclusively his, and that even mentioning it would have consequences. But she hoped Henry would agree, especially if the choice was between that and losing her completely. The implication was obviously that she had me as a backup plan, and I was surprisingly okay with that. I was going to get it, at least partially, anyway, and if Henry reacted the way I probably would have reacted in his place, then I was probably going to get all of it. In my mind, I convinced myself that whatever happened was ultimately Henry's decision, and if he and Gina broke up, it would be his decision, which meant it was his fault, and my hands were clean. Henry. The next morning, I got up at 5:00 and took a taxi home. Gina didn't usually get up this early, and I needed time to put tires on the Malibu and gather parts and tools. I was almost finished when Gina appeared at the door leading from the house to the garage. Sorry if I woke you up. I will leave soon. You didn't wake me up. I cannot sleep without you. I think you'll have to get used to it. Were you going to just sneak out and leave without saying a word to me? Do I really mean that little to you? You don't want me to answer that question, Gina. I really don't want you to leave. I love you. Henry, you probably don't believe me, but I love you. I gave you the best years of my life, Henry, and I'm ready to share the rest with you. But I love him too, and I feel that my life would not be complete if I did not share part of it with him. We don't have to finish, Henry. It will just be the new normal. I got a little angry. You must think you're pretty hot if you think that after 20 years of having you all to myself, I wouldn't mind you working part-time. The thought of two men being willing to share you and just being happy with whatever time you give them must be a huge ego boost for you. No need to be offended, Henry. And no, I don't think I'm hot, as you so elegantly put it. I'm just a woman who loves two men and is trying to find a middle ground. You don't need to worry about it. We will divorce soon, and then you can be with the person you always really wanted. I'm glad I was the right candidate until he came along. Against my will, I started to cry a little. I felt like a complete failure. I mean, what kind of man just loses his wife without doing anything wrong? The only answer I could come up with was that I was simply not worth staying married. I wasn't good enough. I was, well, a failure, and I lost. Henry, please don't say I thought that about you. I married you with the full intention and hope of being happy with you for the rest of my life. You were my man, not a figurehead, okay? I hope you know that. It certainly doesn't look like it. It feels like you couldn't wait to push me away. But anyway, it doesn't matter anymore. Of course, it's important, Henry. You matter, and I never meant to hurt you. This was never the plan. It just happened. Yes, but I'm sure it will comfort me when I'm lying alone in bed, and the woman I've dedicated my entire adult life to is in bed with someone who should have been my friend. You can both go to hell. That day, I walked around at work like a sleepwalker. During my lunch break, I made an appointment with a lawyer for the next day, and after work I went to the bank to split our funds into accounts for me and her. It seemed unfair, since she was leaving me for a man who was quite capable of supporting her at her usual level. But I knew that in reality we would most likely split everything equally. Under the circumstances, I was hoping to avoid alimony, and it would be nice to get most of our assets, but I guess we'll see how things work out. In any case, none of us will be short of money. Later in the evening, I stopped by home, planning to pick up a few more of my things. Without thinking about it, I drove up to the house and pressed the garage door opener. As the door lifted, I saw that a very familiar Mercedes was parked in the space that had been occupied by my Malibu. It certainly didn't take long. I just stared at the damn car for a minute, and as I sat there, I saw the kitchen door open and Gina appear in the doorway. I'm guessing she heard the garage door opener motor start. Our eyes met briefly before I backed out of the driveway and drove away. A few minutes later, my phone rang. You won't guess who it was. It went to voicemail, and I listened to it when I got back to the hotel room. Henry, I'm so sorry you saw that. I wasn't expecting you tonight, and I felt lonely and sad. It was bad manners to bring him into the house, especially so soon, but I didn't realize it until I saw your face. I'm really sorry, and it won't happen again. Gina. Damn it. I still hoped that Henry would consider my offer. I knew he was upset, and it wasn't a surprise, but I hoped that our love for each other would force him to at least come to terms with the fact that we will try to come to an agreement. Maybe he'll like it, at least to some extent. For example, he'll have more time to work on his cars while I'm with John. Maybe we could tailor part of the schedule around the car shows he enjoys so much. That is, if he is not in the city, he will not even notice that I am not there. But he arrived unexpectedly, and it was a real setback. He didn't say he would come here, and I was lonely and upset, so I called John and asked him to come. There was nothing sexual except for the kiss on the couch, and there won't be anything until we sort this out. Henry was still my husband, and I was going to respect that. But Henry probably saw it differently. He opened his own garage door and saw John's car parked there, and probably took this to mean that he had already been replaced. This was going to make it even more difficult to achieve my goal of keeping both my men. Henry. She did what? The voice screaming from the other end of the phone belonged to my 18-year-old daughter, Natalie. She asked me to share her with Uncle John, and when I refused, she left me for him, I repeated. Damn it. Nat, stop it. It's your mom. I don't care who she thinks she is. My mom wouldn't do anything like that, not to the man who loved her for over 20 years. How dare she do this? Listen, honey, I know you're angry at her, and you have a right to be. But just remember that she is the same person who took care of you all these years. She loves you, but she clearly felt like she had to do this. Nonsense. Stop defending her, Dad. She loved you and was happy. What the hell else does she need? How the hell could she do this to you, to us? God, how I hate her now. I know, dear. I feel the same way, but honestly, why would I want to be with someone who would rather be with someone else? You're right about that, but it's like she lied for 20 years and wasted your life. I thought so too at first, honey, but I got you out of that deal, so it was worth it. I know, but still. And you know, part of me was always outside of them because I didn't go to college with them. It's not much, but when they talked about those days, I couldn't join them. I'm not happy about it, but I'll just have to do my best. I know it will happen, Daddy. Let me know if you need anything, and me and my friends are always willing to take you out to dinner to make you feel better." We laughed, and I felt better. At least I wasn't the only one who thought it was wrong. The next day, I was having lunch when the phone rang. I thought it was Gina again, but Scott's name came up on the caller ID. HM. "Henry, how are you? It depends on how much you know." "We know everything. Last night, John and Gina brought us up to speed." "Then I guess you know how I'm doing." "What's happened?" "First of all, we wanted to apologize for what was happening and that we knew nothing about it. Gina mentioned that you were a little angry that we all kept her and John's original relationship a secret. I hope you understand that there was nothing malicious in this. We just thought it would be better if you didn't know. We might have made a different decision now, but we were young and decided that what you don't know won't hurt you." "Of course, Scott, I understand. At first I was angry about it, but if I were you, I would have done the same thing, so I don't have any hard feelings about it. Andrea, Bill, and Lisa will be glad to hear this. The other thing is, well, we know you and Gina were supposed to host this week, but we thought it would be awkward, so we'll move it to Bill and Lisa week. This is wonderful. I won't go either way, so it doesn't matter to me where you spend it. I thought it might be too soon, but I don't want you to think you're not welcome. Just let us know when you're ready." "Sorry, Scott, I guess I wasn't clear enough. I won't come again, ever. Look, I know this is hard, but we are your friends, and we won't let you be alone. We didn't let John do it when Marcy died, and we won't let you do it now. I appreciate your thoughts, Scott, I really do, and I have no particular ill will towards the rest of you. But obviously these are different situations. I just refuse to be where these two are. They betrayed me, and I refuse to have anything to do with them, at least socially, ever again. But I understand that the rest of you are caught in the middle through no fault of your own, and it's best if I leave. It would be unfair to give you a choice. It all started with the girls in college, and with you three too. I'm an outsider, so it's better if I'm the one moving on. I really don't know what to say, buddy. I understand your reasoning, although we have never considered you an outsider. You may have been the last one at the party, but you were still one of us. I appreciate it, I really do. But I just won't be able to sit and chat with them as if nothing happened. I don't blame the rest of you, but I sure do blame them, and I can't say what would have happened. If the opportunity arises to do something without them, well, that's something I'll consider, but this is the best I can do. What about Natalie? I mean, she'll probably get married one day and give you grandchildren. At some point, you'll have to deal with them, won't you? What then? I hope that is still a long way off, and perhaps by then I will be in such a state that I can at least tolerate them. If not, well, we'll have to come up with something. When I hung up, it dawned on me that my entire life had been focused on my marriage to Gina. All my friends were her first, at least for a few years. I did not maintain any friendships outside of it. Of course, there were people at work whom I considered friends, but in reality, they were just acquaintances. I did not communicate with them outside of work. I think it's time to think about changing this, or at least doing something about it. Gina. I was sitting in Bill and Lisa's front yard at our first meeting since everything changed. I was upset when I found out that Henry wouldn't come this week and might never come again. I really thought that if the three of us sat down, we could work things out so that we could at least remain friends. If Marcy, John, and I could do it then, I was confident that John, Henry, and I could do it now. When Andrea, Lisa, and I talked that night, they seemed to understand where I was going with this. I couldn't do anything about the way things turned out. I should have married John 20 years ago, but it didn't happen. Should I be blamed for trying to right this wrong now? Should this cost me my marriage? It didn't seem fair. Tonight, things were kind of awkward. Of course, it had been many years since others had seen John and I holding hands and acting around each other. I assumed that everyone would have to get used to it, although for me the meeting with John went without problems. This, like nothing else, told me that everything was right. Henry. Finally, I moved into an apartment and stored the Malibu. This made it more awkward to work with, but I thought it was temporary. I made some efforts to establish a social life, but it turned out to be more difficult than I expected. I didn't work in an office. I made my living on construction sites, where I was the leader of a group of young guys, none of whom seemed interested in hanging out with the boss outside of work. Not to mention, we usually finished work around 3:30 p.m., so they weren't eager to leave right away. They went home, cleaned themselves up, and left later, so there was no coming over for a drink after work. In the end, I decided to just go out alone in the evening. Maybe I'll meet someone, and I don't necessarily mean a woman. I wasn't really looking for a relationship, I just wanted to make new friends to hang out with. I tried visiting a couple of places that Gina and I had been to before, thinking that I would feel comfortable there and maybe see someone familiar. These were clubs with dancing, but the problem was that I just wasn't that social, at least not like that. And I suffered from self-doubt, thanks to Gina. The decisive moment came approximately 6 months after the final divorce. John and Gina bought out my share of the house and took out their own loan to refinance it. I was a little annoyed that they were living in it. I didn't like the idea of John living in my house. I wanted to sell it so they could buy something else. But Gina loved the house more than I did. Obviously, she actually wanted to keep the house. So I reluctantly agreed to let them buy me out. I was at one of our old places and had a good time. Trying to get out of my comfort zone, I bought drinks for a few ladies and was rewarded with a few dances. But nothing serious happened, just fun. And then they walked in, Gina and John in all their glory. No one else seemed to care, but when I saw them at the door, my whole mood was completely ruined. Gina looked gorgeous as always, and my heart sank to my stomach. I was furious that she still had such power over me and my feelings, and I was very indignant that they looked happy while I continued to struggle. I haven't seen her since the final divorce hearing or talked to her other than about divorce-related things since the day I picked up Malibu. All of our communication at that point was via email or text messages, and it was mostly about Natalie. I really didn't want to talk to her, so I retreated to the back of the club, thinking that eventually they would move away from the door and I could sneak out. But, of course, they took a table right by the door, so I positioned myself in the far corner, not taking my eyes off the possibility of getting out of there. They ordered drinks, and then I watched as John wandered off, presumably to the toilet. He casually looked around the club and looked in my direction, but there was no eye contact, and I was sure that he did not see me. But since Gina was still sitting at the table, I was stuck in place. But as soon as John returned to the table, he whispered in her ear. Then they both turned to look in my direction, and soon Gina was making her way through the crowd to find me. I started to move towards the back of the club, but soon reached a dead end, and she did not lose sight of me, and soon we were face to face. "Why are you running from me, Henry?" "Because I don't want to talk to you. I think that should be obvious. I just wanted to say hello and ask how you are doing. We were married for over 20 years. Are we not friends anymore?" "No, Gina, that's not true. We are ex-spouses who share a child together. That's all. If you just stopped loving me and decided you wanted freedom, then maybe, at least I could respect the change in feelings and how you dealt with it. But the way you did it, declaring your love for me, even when you tried to convince me to share you, and then choosing my friend over me. No, these actions meant that we would never be anything other than people who were once married. Besides, why do you care? You have the man and the life you wanted, and you still have your friends. I could just as easily die like Marcy, and it wouldn't affect you." "It is not true. Despite what you think, Henry, I still love you, still have feelings for you. I'm still willing to share my time between you, even though I know it's not possible for you. You mean a lot to me, Henry, and it hurts me that things are the way they are. Is there a chance that one day we will become friends? Is there a chance that history will turn around and you will never leave me for John? This is the answer to your question too. All I did was love you with all my might for over 20 years, and that meant nothing to you once you had the chance to be with John. Now, excuse me, but I suddenly don't like the atmosphere in this place. I quickly left the club before my true feelings betrayed me. John tried to tell me something, but my look made him think. I still loved her even though I told the truth about what kind of friends we were. I didn't consider us friends, and the fact that none of the others contacted me or invited me to hang out with them without Gina and John meant that we weren't friends anymore either. They didn't even respond to messages or emails I sent them lest you think I was just waiting for them to make the first move. Maybe they found it too awkward or uncomfortable, or maybe I was only really accepted while I was with Gina, and once it was over, I was left out. Whatever the reason, that evening I realized that as long as I remained in the same field, I would never move forward. Every place I went to, I chose because I was comfortable. I had good memories because Gina and I had been there before, and I tried to build on those memories. But in reality, it was holding me back. It's time to completely cut ties and start a new life on your own. Nothing as drastic as moving to another state or anything after all. Natalie was still nearby at university, and I wanted to be close to her. But I could deal with that and still be in a completely different place. Parts of the city than Gina and John. Gina. I was very hurt after talking with Henry. In my mind, at least, we remained friends. When we saw him at the club, I just went up to say hello and ask how he was doing. That was all. But he saw me coming and suddenly turned around and tried to run away from me. But he struck back by letting me know that he didn't even consider us friends. It was very painful. I hoped that we would have a good relationship after the divorce. I didn't lie. I still loved him. And even now, if he came back, I would go back to the time-sharing plan. Of course, the ratio would be different since John and I were married, but I was still interested. Henry, of course, wasn't interested. I went back to John after Henry left the club, and I actually thought Henry might take a swing at John when he left. But he didn't, and my interest in the date dropped dramatically. It took a few dances and more than a few drinks to get me back into a good mood. Henry. I started looking for housing in an area that I had worked in a few times and liked when I was there. It was about a 30-minute drive from the area where my former home was, now occupied by Gina and John, which seemed like a good buffer zone. The university was 90 minutes away, which was close enough, but also far enough if you know what I mean. I looked at several houses before I finally found one I liked. It was a little smaller than my old 4-bedroom house, and in fact, it reminded me of the first house Gina and I moved into, even though it was a rental. It had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, including a master bath. The house had a large backyard, and I thought maybe a pool would be a nice addition. I set up one of the other rooms as a bedroom that Nat could use when she came to visit, or for other guests to use. The 3rd bedroom was equipped as an office, and also had a small folding sofa in it in case I had 2 guests at the same time. The house was located on a small cul-de-sac in an old but well-kept area. My research showed that the homeowners association was relatively calm compared to others I had heard of, so I made an offer and closed in about 45 days. The area was very quiet, and I was afraid that my move would disturb it, although in reality there was no way to avoid it. So I grabbed a few packages of cupcakes and left one at each door on the street, along with a note letting me know when I'd be moving and apologizing for the trouble. Obviously, having lost my friends to divorce, I expected the movers and myself to do all the work. But to my surprise, several of my new neighbors joined me as soon as the truck arrived. I didn't really have much stuff, but as luck would have it, a truck from a furniture store pulled up. I got a ton of pizza delivered, and by the end of the day, not only was the truck emptied, but the boxes were unpacked and everything was put away. I decided that I would like it here. That evening, I played poker with my neighbors for the first time. Everyone else on this street had lived here for at least a few years. They were all good friends and played almost every week. In fact, the only reason my house was on the market was because Travis and Rachel, the couple I bought the house from, were getting a divorce due to Travis' infidelity. The guys say they didn't know anything about it and would have told Rachel if they had known. It was an old cliché. He had a relationship with his secretary and decided to leave his wife for her when she became pregnant with his child. Rachel returned home to Georgia and Travis moved to another part of town after everyone started looking down on him. Usually the games were on Wednesday nights, but today they had an impromptu game in honor of the new guy. The guys played cards and the wives did whatever they wanted. They had a rotating schedule. One week they might play Scrabble, the next they'd have a book club, things like that. Part of me was upset that I didn't have a wife who could contribute to the female side of life, but obviously it couldn't be helped. So what do you do, Henry? Asked Rick, a short but powerfully built guy. I swear he had muscles. Well, I currently work as a project manager for an electrical contractor, but I am also a licensed electrician, plumber, and general contractor. Ed Clinics. Hey, we can definitely use a person like that here. The rest of the guys nodded in agreement. In what sense? I asked. We have, well, I guess you could call it a barter system on the street, Bart explained. Ed is a financial planner, so he manages our investment accounts. I work as a regional manager for H&R Block, so I do tax returns. Rick owns a couple of gyms and is a personal trainer, so he gives us free memberships and helps us stay in shape. And Rob is the general manager at the arena, so he gets us tickets to shows and sporting events whenever he can. Each of us provides our labor free of charge, while the recipient is responsible only for actual expenses, filing fees, surcharges, and the like. If you want to get involved, I think you could do some minor home repairs for us. We're not talking about rebuilding or anything like that, but a leaky faucet or a bad switch, things like that. Interested? Absolutely, I replied. What about the other two houses on this street? The house on the other corner is Monroe's house, Ed said. They are an elderly couple. He's a retired military man, but he has pretty bad arthritis. In fact, they probably need your help the most. We include them in our group, but mostly because of Miss Ruth's cooking and baking rather than anything else. They usually host a neighborhood dinner about once a month. Eventually, you'll probably meet their daughter, the Ice Queen. Ice Queen, what does it mean? You'll see. Trust me. Other people are walkers. Rob finally joined. They've been living there for about 5 years and don't communicate much, at least with us. You can wave to them as they drive by, but that's it. Plus, they are older. We played a few games of cards, and then I asked my next question. So, is there anything I need to know about any of you guys? For example, Bart asked. Oh, the usual stuff. Are any of you Satanists, or believe in human sacrifice, or have a particular dislike for top 40 music, and everything like that? It's not that weird, Rick said. But if we remember anything, we'll let you know during our monthly meeting. This caused a response from one of the wives in the other room, although I didn't know which one. Ha, just wish it. It was a really fun night, and I believed I had found the friends I was looking for. Natalie. I was still angry at Mom, but I was glad that Dad had moved on with his life. I really think he might have thought about Mom's agreement for about 2 nanoseconds. I talked to my dad at least once a week, and usually more often. We had always been very close, and this seemed to bring us even closer. I planned to visit his new place, but first I wanted to give him a chance to get comfortable. I also met a guy named Michael, so I spent a lot of time with him too. My mom often tried to call me, but I usually didn't want to talk to her, so I left a message on voicemail. And when I did pick up, it usually escalated into yelling and name-calling, which made me less likely to pick up the next time she called. Basically, she wanted my blessing or something for what she did, and to acknowledge her marriage to her ex-Uncle John. I told her right away that this wouldn't happen. Maybe someday, but as far as I understand, he doesn't exist, and if she wants to spend time with me, then only without him. She was my mother, and I was willing to give her time, but I was not obligated to him. If he had kept his mouth shut, my parents would still be married. Henry. Over the next week, I worked tirelessly during the day and settled into the house in the evening. I ended up rearranging a few things around the kitchen to make things go more smoothly. But other than that, the initial unpacking was done very well. The following Saturday morning, I walked 2 doors down to introduce myself to Monroe. I knocked softly on the door, and soon the door opened, and people I thought were Mr. and Mrs. Monroe both opened the door. "Yes," said the woman. "Good morning. My name is Henry Weston. I just moved into a house 2 doors down and would like to introduce myself." "Oh, come in, come in. We saw the truck and all the activity down there. It's very nice of you to stop by. Please have a seat." We spent a few minutes talking. Richard served 30 years in the Navy, starting while still in high school, before health problems forced him to retire. They were married during his initial enlistment and were approaching their 45th wedding anniversary. At the age of 30, they became parents. They had an only daughter. Her name was Taylor. They showed me pictures of her on the wall. She had long, straight black hair, and I told them the honest truth. "She's beautiful. Do you see her often?" "Actually, several times a month. She teaches and coaches high school volleyball. She comes quite often. And she's not married. Are you a single man, Mr. Weston?" I smiled at her obvious attempt at matchmaking. "Yes, but I've been divorced for about a year." This seemed to make her happy. I ended up offering my services on a barter basis, for lack of a better term, and they showed me a few things around the house that were in disrepair. Indeed, the faucet was leaking in the bathroom, and there were several chips on the walls. The inside of the house was nothing major, but the outside had a few problems. Siding had fallen off, bricks were broken, and a few other things were the usual signs of years of neglect. Again, nothing I can't handle, but it will take a while. I grabbed my tools and got to work on the leaky faucet. This led to me discovering a few more problems with the pipes and bathtub, and I soon turned off the water and took everything apart. At this time, I saw their daughter for the first time, who happened to come to visit. She came around the corner and saw me working in her parents' bathroom. "Who the hell are you?" she asked, her tone of voice even less friendly than her words. "My name is Henry. Make sure you clean up after yourself. And I expect to see an itemized bill to make sure you didn't rip off a couple of elderly people. Is it clear?" The fury in her tone shocked me, and all I could do was nod. When she left, I went back to work an ice queen indeed. But despite this, I still appreciated it visually. The photographs didn't lie. She was very beautiful. Her black hair hung straight down and cascaded over her shoulders. She was in good shape, with a body type that I would describe as thick, which is a body type I really like. Skinny may be in fashion, but I don't really like it. Gina, in fact, was built exactly the same. I heard her talking to her parents. "Mom, Dad, I told you not to hire people to do repairs without consulting me. You guys are ripe to be taken advantage of. He destroyed the whole damn bathroom because of a leaky faucet. Did he even tell you what he was doing?" "It's all right, dear," said Miss Ruth. "We didn't hire him. He is our new neighbor. He moved into an old house Sonoff. He only takes money for materials." "Oh, like he can't overprice them." "Don't pay him until I've had a chance to inspect everything. He will probably break something on purpose so that he can deceive you again later." At this moment, they moved away. I went back to work, and about an hour later, Miss Ruth came in to see me. "I am very sorry for the way Taylor behaved." "It's okay, ma'am. She was just looking out for you. Still, it was wrong to talk to you like that. She really is a very sweet girl, but I'm afraid she became like this after her own divorce 3 years ago." "What's happened?" "You know, I don't know for sure, except that he cheated on her. She never told us the whole story. I think she finds it shameful. But she divorced him, not the other way around. By the way, dinner is at 18 Do you think you will be able to finish by this time?" "Absolutely. Will your daughter be there?" "To be honest, I had already suffered enough from the Ice Queen and was already trying to come up with reasons to skip dinner if she stayed. But Miss Ruth realized that I hoped she would. Unfortunately, she had to leave. Maybe next time. Taylor. Men suck. That's all. They were liars, cheaters, and deceivers. My ex-husband, Jimmy, somehow managed to be all three at the same time. I met him during my senior year at the University of Florida. I was there on a volleyball scholarship and getting a degree in education as well as a coaching certificate. We got along very well, and I thought we would get married soon after graduating from university. But in fact, 3 years passed. Jimmy insisted that he was simply not mature enough. But at the same time, he said that he loved me and was devoted only to me, and I believed him. Shortly after leaving school, Jimmy got a good-paying job working for a local woman named Margaret Healy. She was a widow and almost 60 years old. After the death of her late husband, she took over part of his business. Jimmy worked directly for her and, according to him, studied all the intricacies and nuances of the business in order to one day lead it. It led to long hours and late nights, but I believed he was working for our future. I met her several times, and she called him the son she never had. Meanwhile, I was teaching and coaching nearby and also living my dream. We even talked about starting a family. We had, as it seemed to me, an ideal life. I was wrong. One weekend, my team was supposed to take part in a tournament in Orlando. We left on Friday evening and were due back on Sunday evening. We left as scheduled and played our matches on Saturday, but stormy weather began to move in from the Atlantic and the Sunday matches had to be canceled. Since the area was evacuated, we loaded onto a bus as a precaution and headed back to Tampa. I tried calling Jimmy, but I only got a voicemail, so I guess he didn't hear about my arrival. I arrived right in the middle of an affair that my husband was having with his boss, her daughter, and his secretary. I was completely terrified. I was smart enough to take a few pictures with my phone, after which I immediately began divorce proceedings. It turned out that Jimmy was cheating with Margaret and her daughter Miranda since he got the job, and the baby Miranda gave birth to 2 years ago was also Jimmy's. And this was no accident. They asked him to father a child for her, and he willingly did so. Not only that, but almost all of our male friends knew what Jimmy was doing and covered for him. In fact, all this has destroyed more than one marriage. Jimmy promised his friends lucrative jobs in exchange for their silence, but he wasn't even allowed to offer them, and now their wives have decided they can't trust them. I was ready to sue everyone, but Mrs. Healy offered me a very generous cash payment so that I would not go to court or talk about it publicly. She also paid for my divorce and my move back to California, and gave me money to live until I could find a job here. As far as I understand, not much has changed except that Jimmy married Miranda. So he got rich and got involved with people as depraved as he was, and I got a one-way ticket out of town and serious trust and anger management issues. Doesn't seem like a fair deal. So okay, this guy working in mom and dad's bathroom was good looking. But I knew there had to be something terrible about him. He was a man, after all, and I wasn't about to fall into that trap again. Henry. The next day, I was invited to dinner with Ed and Kathy and was looking forward to getting to know the couples better in a non-group setting. Katie was a surprisingly sweet woman, although not particularly attractive. She had dark brown hair and scars on her face, evidence of a teenage battle with acne, and she was quite round. She was more chubby than fat, but she had very large breasts and a decent ass. But the most important thing was that she and Ed were head over heels in love with each other. I happened to mention that I spent time at Monroe's yesterday to tidy up the plumbing in their bathroom. "Have you met the Ice Queen?" Ed asked. "Edward, I asked you not to call her that," Katie intervened. "It's not beautiful." "Just like she is with us," Ed objected. "Yes, I met her," I said. "She came to visit her parents while I was working." "And what did she say?" Ed asked, looking in Katie's direction. It seemed like he knew Taylor had done something in the Ice Queen style and was just waiting to prove that she deserved the title. She told me to clean up and not try to rob her parents. And then she gave them a dressing down for hiring someone who would probably rob them and break something on purpose. Ed had a very smug smile on his face, but Katie gave as much as she got. I never said she was a good person. I just want to say that talking about her like that doesn't make you any better. Guys, what do you know about her? I asked. It's hard for me to believe that such nice people raised such a harpy from their daughter. There must be something more. Katie summarized what they knew. Apparently, she was married and lived in Florida about 3 years ago. She got divorced and moved back here. Perhaps she has some anger left over from the divorce, or maybe she's just a bitch. We never saw her act any differently, but then we didn't know her before. We all tried to invite her to some neighborhood get-togethers when she first arrived, but she never agreed, Ed contributed. So we just stopped inviting people. It's a shame, I said. She is an amazingly beautiful woman. When I saw her picture on their wall, I thought she was someone I'd like to meet and thought, or maybe hoped, that you guys were exaggerating the Ice Queen story, but I was quickly convinced. The following weekend, Natalie and her roommate Patris came to visit. Patris was pretty, but nothing special, at least in terms of looks. She had shoulder-length wavy brown hair and a slender figure. She had small breasts and slender hips, and the white denim skirt she wore showed off her beautiful legs. We spent the day at the mall, and I bought a few things for both girls. Nat told me that Patris's parents can only pay for her college expenses, so things like new clothes aren't in the budget. I could afford it, so I thought, what the heck? We had lunch at the food court in the mall, and then, at Patris's request, we had dinner at Olive Garden. After returning home, we watched a movie on a pay-per-view channel and then went to bed. The guest room had a double bed, so the girls could sleep together if they wanted, but Patris chose to use the pull-out couch in my office. On Sunday, I invited girls for brunch, and we spent the rest of the day just talking. Natalie, as she often did, took the opportunity to again encourage me to start dating, even mentioning that there were several graduate students and even a few professors at the university who were single and would make a good match. I expressed my gratitude for her concern, but declined her proposal for matchmaking. The following week, during a poker game, I learned that Natalie and Patris's visit had not gone unnoticed. So, Henry, Bart said, you had a couple of hot young chicks at your house over the weekend. Enjoying your single life, right? Bart, I smiled. I'd appreciate it if you don't call my daughter a chick, at least not to her face. And the other girl was her college roommate. Bart blushed slightly and stammered an apology, but I assured him that nothing bad had happened. 2 weeks later, we gathered for the monthly neighborhood dinner at Monroe's house. Miss Ruth knew how to set the table, and everything was very tasty. It is not surprising that all the neighbors were happy about their participation in the barter exchange. Miss Ruth tried to keep the couple separate when hosting get-togethers, always trying to have them on a boy-girl basis, and generally mixing them up from month to month. It was her way of breaking down any barriers that might exist and putting everyone on the street on an equal footing. Mr. Monroe sat at the head of the table, and Miss Ruth at the end. I found myself between Ed's wife, Kathy, and Bart's wife, Jennifer. Jennifer was a tall, slender Latina. She was beautiful, but she wore too much makeup. I think she would have been beautiful anyway, but I never saw her without the excessive makeup she seemed to favor. But she was perfect in the main thing. She loved Bart with everything she had. In fact, it was obvious that all the couples on this street were completely devoted to each other. This got me thinking about how the former owners of my house ended up here. Part of me was disappointed that Taylor wasn't there. On the one hand, I knew that neither couple cared about her very much, but I also doubted that they had a chance to get to know her better. They only knew the bitch, who was still bitter about her divorce 3 years later. But for me, there was something about her that drew me to her, and I couldn't explain it. I just felt like there was something in her, someone special, if there was a way to get through all the anger and hatred. Taylor. I tried to avoid my mom's monthly meetings with couples in her area, and the last meeting last week was no exception. She took them all in as surrogate children and really enjoyed cooking for them, but I didn't like spending time there during those parties. Probably, there was nothing wrong with the people themselves. It was just hard for me to be around all these happy couples when my personal life was in complete crap. More often than not, when I looked at a man, especially a married one, I couldn't help but suspect that he was cheating. This was frustrating because I really wanted to meet someone, get married again, and hopefully have a couple of kids, and my window of viability in terms of children was closing. I tried to overcome this attitude, but I was so hurt by what Jimmy had done that it was very difficult to do. I had to admit that I felt some sympathy for Henry. We crossed paths a couple of times, and he seemed nice to me. According to Mom and Dad, he was perfect. But I also knew he was divorced, and I didn't know why, which probably meant he had cheated on his wife. And I wasn't about to go down that road again, as they say. Once he cheated, always will change. Last night, I stayed at my parents' house. We stayed up late watching movies and TV, so I just fell asleep in their guest bedroom. But when I got up this morning to go to work, my damn car wouldn't start. Mom, can I take your car today? My car won't start, and I'll be late for work. Of course, dear, we don't have any plans for today. Thank you. I'll come right after work and sort it out. Henry. The phone rang early in the morning, and I was surprised that it was Miss Ruth on the other end. Henry, I'm terribly sorry to bother you so early in the morning, but I wanted to catch you before you left for work. No problem, Miss Ruth. I have a day off today, and I already woke up. What can I do for you this morning? You know how to repair cars, don't you? Yes, a little, ma'am. More in restoration than repair, but I know something. Are you having problems with your car? Not mine, but Taylor's. Her car won't start. She borrowed mine to get to work, but I thought maybe you could figure it out. Do you have the keys to her car? Yes, we have spare ones. I'll go down and have a look now. Since I was free for the next few days until my next work project was up and running, it was the perfect time for the machine to break down. As I told Miss Ruth, I didn't know everything about auto repair, but it didn't take me long to determine that the problem was with the alternator. I really liked the idea of doing something nice for Taylor. I felt a strong connection with her. Of course, she was beautiful, but there was more to her than that. I felt a surge of energy whenever she was in the same room with me and wondered if she felt it too. I really wanted to ask her out, but she still seemed very withdrawn. But I was determined to break through her cold exterior, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to do something new. I spent the next few hours getting the car fixed, including a trip to the dealership to get an alternator since the auto parts store didn't have one. I managed to fix the car about an hour before Taylor returned. Taylor. Mom, I'm back. Thank you for providing the car. I walked into the house and said hello to Mom and Dad, then started looking for the number of a towing service to take the car to a mechanic. Then I would have rented a car, but my mother stopped me. That's not necessary, darling. Your car has been repaired. Did my car magically get fixed while I was gone? Okay, Mom, I need to get this done before everything closes. No, dear, there was no magic. I asked Henry to take a look, and he took care of everything. Crap. It was very sweet, especially when I was so surly with him. I went out to my car, and it started right up. I walked 2 houses down to his house and knocked on the door. When he opened it, he wasn't wearing a shirt, and it looked like he was working out. I had to admit he looked good. He was muscular, but not overly so. I felt something, okay? It was more than just something that I hadn't felt in a while, and I realized that I was starting to be drawn to him. Hello, Taylor. How are you today? How's your work? His tone surprised me, as if he was really happy to see me and was genuinely interested in how my day was going. This was in stark contrast to how I usually greeted him. Why was he so nice? Everything was fine, Henry. Thanks for asking. Mom said you fixed my car. I wanted to thank you for your help and find out how much I owe you. I was pleased to do this. It was my pleasure to help you, and you don't owe me anything. I would hate not to pay you. What was wrong with her? Just some loose wires. This happens sometimes, but now they are well and securely fastened. You shouldn't have any more problems. Well, thank you. I'm glad it was such a small thing and hope it wasn't too much of a problem. Once again, I am very grateful to you. My pleasure. I was very pleased. He seemed genuinely and heartily happy that he took care of my problem. It looked like he liked me, although I didn't give him any reason to. I was smiling and in a good mood as I walked back to Mom and Dad's house. Mom noticed my smile. You look cheerful, my dear. I didn't want to admit that my mood was at least partially okay, mostly due to the conversation with Henry and seeing him shirtless. Oh, just glad it was just a few loose wires and nothing serious. Is this what he told you? Yes, why? Honey, he spent the whole day replacing some parts in your engine. Your dad says it's a $400 repair. He only told you it was the wires because he didn't want you to pay him. I don't understand. He didn't say anything about any spare parts. Why didn't he let me pay him? Mom broke out into a huge smile and looked at me as if I were the stupidest person in the world. What do you think, honey? Suddenly, I smiled even wider. Gina. I got into a good rhythm of life with John. We got married shortly after my divorce from Henry was final, and I was happy. But the thing is, I wasn't happier, and that surprised me. As much as I loved John, I thought marrying him would be even more amazing than marrying Henry, but it wasn't. It wasn't worse, just different. We still had weekly barbecues with Scott, Andrea, Bill, and Lisa. Life basically continued the same, with the very notable exception of two things: our children. At least Natalie still talks to me sometimes, even if it's often accompanied by angry words and a raised voice. Savannah hasn't spoken to John since she found out, other than to tell him not to talk to her again. He periodically tries to contact her, but she still has not responded. I think none of us expected such consequences. I mean, Marcy had already moved on, so it wasn't like John left her for me, but Savannah is acting like he did. And since she doesn't talk to us, we don't know exactly what her problem is. But John and I did our best to focus on ourselves. The barbecues were the same, fun and stress-free. None of the other couples expressed any negative reaction to what we did. But the main thing is that we are happy together. And although I can't say I would have made the same choice if I knew then what I know now, I love him and we are making the best of the situation. Henry. It was Sunday and the ladies next door were having a bachelorette party, so the guys decided to do the same. We first went bowling, then had dinner, and then ended up at a club where a popular local band was performing. There was also a dance floor, but we weren't going to go there. The wives wouldn't be happy if one of the guys spread out the proverbial carpet with another woman, and I don't really like dancing. At least that's the way it's done these days. The evening went on, and the band was pretty good. I can't deny that we liked to look at some of the women on the dance floor, but that's where our misdeeds ended. Rick saw her first. Isn't that the ice queen in that booth over there? He pointed to a dark corner to the side of the stage. To my surprise, Taylor was sitting there, and alone. She looked so beautiful. I assumed that she had a date there and that he had gotten up to get them drinks, and I deflated a little, although I tried not to show it. That makes sense, since she only really comes out at night, Bart grumbled. Everyone except me laughed. I thought her religion was keeping her from having a good time, Ed said. Everyone else laughed again. I bet she drinks Bloody Marys, Rob added. There was more laughter, and I realized that I was starting to get angry, but I controlled myself. While I was watching, an attractive blonde came and sat in the other chair at her table. and I suddenly felt better. She wasn't on a date, she was with a friend. Where just a minute ago Taylor was looking at her phone, she was now animatedly talking to her friend. While I was watching them, two guys came up to the table and asked them to dance. The blonde immediately stood up and took one of the guys by the hand, but Taylor shook her head very calmly and politely, and I saw her say, "No, thank you." The guy was clearly disappointed, but he turned and left. I watched this happen 3 or 4 more times until people stopped asking Taylor to dance and started hitting on her friend. After about an hour and a half, I had already drunk several glasses. Okay, it was Diet Coke, I don't like alcohol. I spent the evening watching the band, or more often than not, Taylor. I really thought she was very beautiful. Once again, I watched as her friend joined the guy on the dance floor. As they walked away, Taylor was approached by a guy who looked quite aggressive and was probably a little drunk. He was clearly asking her to dance, and she again politely declined. But this guy got agitated and started arguing with her quite loudly. I wasted no time getting up and heading towards them. As I got closer, I began to hear what he was saying. "You've had your nose buried in this damn phone all evening. This is a dance club. You must dance. Again, I appreciate your offer, but I'm here to spend time with a friend," Taylor said. He tried to pull her onto the dance floor. "Come on, honey. You'll have fun when you get out on the playground." "Really, I'm not interested. Please leave me alone." Finally, I joined the party. "Hey, buddy, the lady said she wasn't interested. Why don't you leave? It's a free country, mate, and I'll stay here and it's none of your business." I looked at Taylor, winked at her, and smiled when our eyes met. I was lifted by a bright smile, which she returned as she looked at me. "You are right. Enjoy your place." I turned to her. "Taylor, would you like to dance?" "My pleasure. Henry, thank you." She slid out the other side of the booth because the asshole wasn't moving. I took her hand and led her to the dance floor. I looked at the guys, and the shocked expressions on their faces were priceless. Suddenly, the drunk guy became less interested in taking that particular seat. The song was mid-tempo, but we danced together as if it were a slow ballad, although not too close. We looked into each other's eyes. "So, it looks like you've gotten into the habit of saving me." "You are worthy of salvation," I replied. I swear I felt her flinch a little when I said that in a good way, like I'd struck the right chord. "Thank you for such a nice compliment. It's strange that it's always you who saves. I wonder why that is." I looked into her eyes again. "I think it's fate." I felt how we connected. I don't even remember ever experiencing this with Gina, even though it's been 20 years. There was something almost otherworldly about it, and I agreed. Our eyes never lost contact. We kissed. My soul caught fire. I could swear I was glowing from within. If the guys were shocked when I took Taylor to the dance floor, I can only imagine what they looked like at that moment. I saw her friend watching us with a look of complete shock on her face. I felt Taylor's head rest on my shoulder. We continued dancing for several songs, never changing what we were doing, no matter the tempo of the song, until I finally broke the silence. "Hey, were you driving the car or your friend?" "She was driving. She came to pick me up at my apartment." "And what?" "I want to take you home." Realizing that it sounded a little like I had something sexual on my mind, I stumbled to correct myself. "I mean, I want you to come home with me." "Not better. So, can I be the person to take you home?" She smiled and giggled slightly while I tried to control myself and my abnormal tongue. "I would like that, and I'm ready to go if you're ready. Let me just tell Karen that I'm leaving." While she was doing this, I went to my table to tell the guys that I was leaving. They all looked rather embarrassed. "Henry," Ed said, "we regret the things we said. If we knew something was going on with you, we wouldn't say anything." "It's okay. Guys, no problems, really. But in the future, if I hear the words Ice Queen in reference to her again, we'll have some words. See you later, guys." "Taylor." I have no idea what prompted the hands of fate to line up all my ducks in a row. Excuse the ambiguous metaphor, but I was so excited about this turn of events. I wasn't even planning on meeting Karen tonight, and suddenly here we are. I was so excited I almost wanted to thank that drunk asshole for bringing Henry to my rescue. "Looks like you met someone," Karen said as I approached her. "He's damn cute." "It's that guy, Karen, the one I told you about." "You mean the guy who lives next to your parents? Are you kidding? What are the chances of this happening?" "I don't know, but he wants to give me a ride home." "Will you be okay here alone?" "Of course, I have a few more friends here with whom I can team up, and I look forward to hearing all about it." "Okay, see you at work tomorrow." I quickly caught up with Henry, grabbing his hand as we got closer, experiencing another small shock. I felt like a schoolgirl on a first date. I almost wanted to giggle and say that we would be fine. He opened the door of his pickup truck and helped me into it. I knew this was his work vehicle, so I was impressed by how clean and nice the cabin smelled. I regretted that he didn't have a sofa. Do they still make those? So I could sit next to him. He slowly pulled to the side and drove onto the road. I put my hands on my knees, not knowing what else to do with them, and he just reached out, took my left hand with his right, and held it while we drove, as if he had done this a million times, and it was the most natural thing in the world. And I liked it. One of the things that disappointed me in Jimmy was his submissive nature. Obviously, this left him open to Healy's influence, but sometimes it annoyed me. I liked that Henry was a man who took responsibility. As we drove, I felt that I needed to break the silence. "Thanks again for dealing with that guy for me." He acted like a real idiot. "Well, a beautiful woman like you makes men make fools of themselves. That's all. How the hell does he always manage to say exactly what he needs to say?" I wondered if he could understand the effect he was having on me. "Can I ask you a personal question, Taylor?" His voice brought my attention back from my feet to him, where he belonged. I wondered what deep, dark secret I was going to tell him because I knew I would tell him anything. "Of course, Henry. Do you like ice cream?" It was not what I expected, but I agreed. "Actually, yes." He just smiled, and before I knew it, we were stopping in front of Baskin-Robbins. Out of habit, I started to open the door, but he just put his hand on mine. "Wait, let me do this." Outwardly, I pretended to be calm, but inside me, everything was screaming with joy. Have I really met a nice guy who knows how to treat a woman? And was he interested in me? I smiled as he opened my door and took my hand to help me out of the truck. We went inside and grabbed a cone, ate mostly in silence, but he never stopped looking into my eyes. Finally, he drove me back to my apartment and walked me to the door. Even though we started the evening apart, I began to think of it as our first date, and first dates always end awkwardly. But, as with everything else, I was wrong again. As soon as we reached my door, he gently pulled me towards him. I expected him to kiss me again, but he didn't, although I knew that he wanted it. "I'm leaving in the morning for work out of town, which will keep me busy all week, so I won't be there until next weekend. Can I ask you out again when I get back?" I looked into his deep brown eyes. I could get lost in them if I wasn't careful, and I really wasn't in the mood to be careful. "Yes, Henry, I would like that. We'll talk when you get back and make a plan." "Fine, although I don't like the idea of waiting that long." Finally, he pulled me towards him and we kissed again. I wanted to invite him inside, but in the end I decided it would be too fast. "Thanks for a great time, Henry." I unlocked the door and entered. "Henry." While I was driving, the truck kept drifting into another lane. Fortunately, there was little traffic. I had a hard time concentrating on driving because my thoughts kept going back to Taylor. I had a huge crush on her, and she seemed to feel the same. It was strange, of course, because before tonight, we had never gone on a date, and this was only half a date. I managed to return to the house unharmed, and when I entered it, it seemed very empty, even more empty than after a divorce. I've never been good at single life. I had only been on my own for a couple of years before meeting Gina, and it seemed like a very lonely existence. I've never been the guy who goes on dates and picks up random women in clubs. I did not go to college, but immediately after school, I began to work in my specialty, like my father. My father died in a construction accident about 10 years ago. Mom then moved back to Massachusetts to live with my grandparents, and we still talk on the phone regularly. It was an early morning, so I packed the last of my things for the week and then climbed into bed. The truth was that I still miss Gina, or at least by her presence, lying in bed with someone, waking up and having someone to talk to, sitting down to breakfast together, that sort of thing. One day, I saw a phrase that I think applies to me, born married. The main point is that I don't feel complete without a permanent woman in my life. Until recently, whenever I felt acutely lonely, Gina's face would appear in my head. It seemed natural because we had been together for so long. But today, as I crawled into bed, I thought about Taylor and wished she were next to me. Taylor. It's been a very long week. I had such a wonderful time and made a real connection with Henry last Sunday night, and then he had to leave town. We talked on the phone a couple of times this week while he was gone, but it wasn't the same as meeting up and going out. He worked a lot and was tired, so we didn't talk for long. When I met Jimmy in Florida, I wasn't in much of a relationship. I had a few high school romances, but nothing serious, certainly no one I thought could be the one. So when I met Jimmy and started getting serious about him, I just knew it was love because I had never felt the way I felt about him. But when Henry held me that night, I realized that what I felt for Henry went beyond that. In fact, it was more like an all-encompassing feeling. Jimmy made my heart flutter. Henry made my whole body shake. Last night, I arrived at my parents' house, knowing that Henry would return from work either late in the evening or early in the morning. It was already mid-morning. Mom was making bacon and eggs and toast. "Honey," Mom asked, "could you go get the newspaper?" "Of course, Mom." I was walking slowly down the path when I noticed a car I hadn't seen before turn the corner onto our street. It was a newer model sedan, but they all looked the same to me. Henry could probably tell me exactly what it is. I thought, and his name popped up in my head, made me look towards his house, and then see this strange car pull up to his driveway. Now this really caught my attention. The car door opened, and a very beautiful young woman, probably around 20 or so, stepped out. Oh, I was not happy about this turn of events. And when I saw her take out her small suitcase from the trunk, I became even more angry. This meant she stayed for the weekend. Then I saw Henry himself, walking from the direction of his house. I hid behind one of the bushes in my mom's yard so he wouldn't see me watching them. The girl came up to him, put down her suitcase, hugged him tightly, and quickly kissed him on the lips. He then picked up her suitcase, took her hand, and they went to his house. I fucking knew it. Men are all the same. Miss Ruth. I was wondering why Taylor was taking so long to bring the newspaper. I was just about to go outside to make sure nothing had happened when she burst through the front door, making a loud noise throughout the house. I thought my decorative plates would fall to the floor, but they held up. "This son of a bitch is a freak," she screamed at the top of her lungs. Oh no, what now? I realized she was on the verge of tears, but they were mixed with intense anger that I hadn't seen since, well, she got divorced. Since then, she had felt bitterness and anger, but never with such intensity. It had to be because of Henry. "What's the matter, dear? What's happened?" I knew it was too good to be true. I just knew it. "Taylor, honey, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a little teenage tramp who just showed up at Henry's house to spend the weekend doing God knows what. I just saw her pull right into his driveway in her little blue car like she owned the place. She kissed and hugged him, and then they went inside. He's probably squeezing her right now." As soon as she said, "little blue car," I knew what a mistake she had made, but I decided to make her suffer a little for jumping to conclusions. Was she a brunette? with hair just above her shoulders. Taylor turned her head and looked at me. If her eyes were lasers, I would already have a hole in my body. Yes, that's exactly it. Do you know her? Oh yes, this is Natalie. We met her a couple of times. She's very sweet. And it didn't occur to you to mention to me that Henry had some girl half his age. Well, until last weekend, I didn't even realize there was any reason to mention it. And last week, it didn't even occur to me. She hasn't appeared for several weeks. What the hell could he see in a girl half his age? Well, I think this is a stupid question. He sees a hot, tight little body that a 36-year-old woman like me can't compete with. But I can imagine him paying for it. The bastard, well, he pays quite a lot. He bought her this car and is paying for her college education. But she loves him very much. I doubt it. Perhaps she only loves his bank account. I don't know why he doesn't see this. Oh, he knows how important money is to her. And he pays them willingly and happily. I'll bet she does, in exchange for what she does for him. But that doesn't matter anymore. He's not my problem anymore. I looked at Taylor and saw that she was suddenly on the verge of tears. It was time to end my little game. Well, Taylor, you really can't blame him. After all, that's what good fathers do. I watched her carefully as the reality of the situation unfolded, and the relief on her face, and indeed throughout her body, was obvious. She felt such obvious relief that tears welled up in her eyes. So, this is his daughter. Yes, honey, and I'm sure you'll like each other very much. She looks so much like him. Come on, honey, let's go sit and eat. You know, you could have said this earlier. And missed this very interesting conversation. I don't think so. I took her hand and sat her down at the table. I placed a plate and a small glass of orange juice in front of her. I would like to know why he got divorced, Taylor said. I'm so afraid it's something he did. Well, why don't you ask him? Call and invite them to dinner tonight, and you two can talk. Do you think he'll tell me? Why not? He clearly has feelings for you. Heck, he even told me. But after all, I am a wise old woman. She stopped eating and looked at me. Did he tell you about his divorce? Tell me, Mother. I'm sorry, dear, but this is not my story to share. This is the conversation you need to have with him. Call him. Henry. I completely forgot that Nat comes over for the weekend, but I'm always happy to see her. I warned her that I might be going somewhere this weekend. Is this with a girl? She asked, smiling and winking. If I go, then yes, it will be with a girl. Well, with a woman. Well done, Daddy, it's high time you got out there. A few minutes later, the phone rang. Hello? Henry, this is Taylor. Hello? I was just about to call you to find out when I could see you. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Mom wanted to know if you don't have any other plans. Would you like to come with your daughter to dinner today? Let me check with the boss. Natalie. Hey, Nat, do you want to go to Miss Ruth's for dinner tonight? Yes, damn it, I won't refuse dinner from the best chef I know. Looks like we'll be there, although I was hoping I wouldn't have to wait until dinner to see you. This will give you the opportunity to spend some time with Natalie. Besides, I have some things to do before I meet you. Taylor. Okay, I was a stupid romantic, but I wanted a new outfit, one that no one had ever seen me in. I didn't want to look slutty or anything, just something new, even if I was the only person who knew it was new. I went to the mall and finally found what I was looking for in a small boutique next to Macy's. It accentuated my round butt, but slightly hid the fact that I don't have very large breasts. After that, I went to a salon in a shopping center where I had my hair cut, washed, and styled. And finally, I went to Ulta and bought some new makeup. On the one hand, I knew that I didn't need to do all this, but on the other hand, I really, really wanted to. I went back to Mom and Dad's house, helped Mom out a little, and then finally hopped in the shower and started getting ready. Henry. I invited Natalie to dinner, and then we went to the cinema. I was just killing time. I told Natalie about the last 2 weeks with Taylor, starting with the car. So you spent the whole day fixing her car and even paid for the part, but you didn't tell her anything? How will she know you did it? It doesn't matter if she knows anything, Nat. She knows I fixed it, but I did it for myself because I wanted to do it for her. I know it seems strange considering your generation is all about letting the whole world know what you had for breakfast on social media, but some people do things because it makes them feel good and they don't want to make a big deal out of it. For example, people who donate to charity and then issue a press release. This makes us wonder if they did it to help people or to help themselves. Okay, I understand your point of view, but I would still like her to know what a good thing you did for her. On the way home, I bought a bottle of wine and flowers, and then we went home to get ready. You've never dressed up for dinner at Grandma Ruth's before. She teased me. She knew exactly why I got a little dressed up, and I just stuck my tongue out. We left my door at 5:56 p.m. and headed to Ruth and Richard's house. I was about to ring the bell when the door swung open and Taylor was waiting for us. We entered the house and Miss Ruth walked towards us. I kissed her on the cheek, handed her the wine and introduced my daughter, the new woman in my life. Natalie, Miss Ruth called, please help me in the kitchen. Of course, Grandma Ruth. Taylor and I stood still until they rounded the corner. Then we looked at each other. I handed her the flowers, then pulled her towards me and kissed her. Today you look even more beautiful. You did your hair. Looks beautiful. I missed you while I was away. I missed you too, and thanks for noticing. You look good too. Let's go out on deck. I'd like to talk a little. I nodded, and she took my hand and led me to the terrace. As we stepped onto the deck, I looked back into the kitchen. Both Natalie and Miss Ruth were smiling widely. They seemed to approve. We sat in a couple of lounge chairs that were close enough to hold hands. How was your work this week? Good in the end. At the very beginning, we had some problems with permits and personnel, but we solved them quite quickly. It was a rush job, so we were paid overtime. But a 12-hour day is a 12-hour day, no matter how much you get paid. It sounds tiring, but I'm glad you're back. She paused for a minute and seemed to be gathering her thoughts, and perhaps the courage to say something specific. Henry, can I ask you a private question? Taylor, you can ask me anything, anytime, and I will always answer you as honestly as I can. I'm sorry to have to ask this, but I have to know. Why did you get divorced? Wow, you immediately went to personal topics. I made myself more comfortable in the chair. I'll make a deal. I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours. Agreed. Well, in general, my wife left me for another man. You know why? I suspected that she was trying to find out if I had done something to push Gina into the arms of another man. Basically, did I cheat on her, hit her, did anything, and did this lead to Gina leaving me? I told her the whole story, from John and Gina's college affair to the eventual divorce, and then my decision to move away and start over. Do you know how they are doing? Does she regret her decision? As far as I know, everything is fine with them. Anyway, I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but I prefer not to hear about them, and Nada respects that. I can't believe she just left a perfectly good marriage like that. I mean, you may have had some problems, but at least from your point of view, everything was fine. If she was unhappy with something, she didn't share it with me. Well, it was a pretty disgusting thing to do, but on the other hand, if she hadn't done it, you wouldn't be sitting here with me right now. You know, I had the same thought. Okay, it's your turn. I listened in shock as she talked about the end of her marriage to Jimmy. It's no surprise that she had issues with anger and trust when it came to men and relationships. He had completely betrayed her. 3 years had passed, and she was still suffering from it. I gently squeezed her hand and, looking into her eyes, said quietly, I'm sorry for what he did, Taylor. We're not all like that. She looked at me with what I hoped was affection for me in her eyes. I could see that she was fighting back tears even now. I know that now. Henry, you showed it to me. Thank you. Our thoughts were interrupted by Natalie's voice coming from behind. Miss Taylor, Dad, dinner is ready. We got up and went into the house. Natalie. I was so happy watching my dad find someone. He mentioned Miss Taylor in passing a couple of times, but I had no idea that they had any kind of relationship, let alone that it developed the way it actually turned out. While they were walking on the deck, I mentioned this to Grandma Ruth, and she told me in more detail what happened last weekend at the club. While I helped prepare dinner, I watched them on the deck. My dad loved my mom unconditionally, and when she left, the light went out in his eyes. But as I watched him hold Miss Taylor's hand as they talked on deck, that light returned and perhaps even grew a little brighter. I've never met Miss Taylor before, but I saw pictures of her on the wall when we visited Grandma Ruth, and Dad told me a little about her this afternoon. She was beautiful in photographs, but even more beautiful in person. Since I didn't really know her, I couldn't understand the expression on her face when she talked to Dad, but I could definitely tell that she had feelings for him. When they talked, she held his hand as if her life depended on it. I almost felt guilty when I went out to tell them that dinner was ready. Taylor. I held Henry's hand tightly as we stood up and headed into the house for dinner. I didn't want to let him go, and with the obvious purpose of cheering us up, we were seated right next to each other. Showing his gentlemanly side again, Henry pulled out my chair and pushed it in as I sat down before sitting down himself. I don't think Jimmy has ever done anything like this. I compared everything Henry and Jimmy did, and every time, Henry came out on top. I think since Jimmy was my only serious partner, everyone had to be compared to him. I wanted to continue holding Henry's hand, but that would require me to eat with my left hand, and that just wouldn't work. So, Natalie, my mother told me that you are studying at the university. What do you study? I'm studying healthcare management. I find medicine interesting, but I'm not interested in all that training, so I decided to go into the administrative side of things. I love it. Dad said that you are a teacher and volleyball coach. There was a quick exchange of glances between them. Henry seemed to say, "You shouldn't have told her that I told you about her." And she seemed to say, "It's a pity." Yes, I work at a local high school, and I really like what I do. Most of the dinner conversation was me learning about Natalie or her telling me about her dad, and it was all good. I realized that she was doing everything she could to show him in the best light possible, and I felt good because it meant that she thought I was good enough for her father. When I was growing up, we all always helped clean up after dinner. We were expected to clear our plates and then help with the cleanup, whether it was washing dishes, clearing tables, or wiping down kitchen counters. Even Dad did his part, so that was my expectation today. Henry, after we clean up, would you like to go for a walk? He looked at me and smiled, as if he was completely delighted with my proposal. I wish I could, but Mom had other plans. Everything is fine. The three of us can handle it. You two, go for a walk. It won't hurt you to be alone. Henry. It was obvious that Taylor was as attracted to me as I was to her, and Natalie and Miss Ruth approved. At Miss Ruth's insistence, we skipped cleaning and walked out the front door for a walk, holding hands the entire way. We walked around the area for about 30 minutes, just talking and getting to know each other. Finally, we returned to my street. Just before the entrance, she suggested an alternative route. You know, I've never been to your house. Do you want to take a look? She nodded, and we continued past her parents' house and on to my house. She looked around while I waited for an answer. I'm impressed, she finally said. Since you're a bachelor, I expected to see a keg in the corner and posters of women in bikinis on the walls. Without missing a beat, I said. Oh, it's in the bedroom. I caught a look that could have knocked me off my feet, and I burst out laughing. I'm just kidding, honey, just kidding. You better be. she began to say, but then her expression changed. What? You? Do you realize you just called me sweetheart? I'm sorry. Maybe I went too far, but that's how I imagined you. She gave me the sweetest look and then said, This is true. I just didn't know if you knew about it or not. She put her arms around my neck and kissed me. Suddenly, she pulled away. I believe the next room I would like to see is your bedroom. I didn't need to be told twice. Taylor. He hugged me and everything was just perfect. As we were resting, I felt him pull me closer and kiss me. The calm was broken when he spoke. Baby, how much time do you have left for rent? This question seemed random to me, but I answered. I still have about 2 months. And what? I hope it's not will scare you, but I don't want to spend another night without you. I think you should move in with me. I'll help you pay the rest of the rent. Thinking about this, a huge smile appeared on my lips. I rolled over so that I was face to face with him. I looked deeply into his brown eyes. I think I should too, I replied. How about you stay here for the night, and tomorrow we'll start moving your things. I can ask the guys to help, so it won't take much time. That sounds great. But we've been gone for quite some time. We should probably go back to my parents' house. I agree we probably need to take a shower first. We climbed into his shower together, got dressed, and went back to Mom and Dad. We found the three of them sitting on the deck talking. We walked out and joined them as if we had only been gone. Hell, almost 2 hours. Sorry we were gone for so long, Mom. We lost track of time. It must have been a kind of walk. You even stopped to take a shower before heading home. It's not that we were ashamed of it, far from it, but we were completely broken. Henry. Taylor and I got married quickly as soon as we got permission. It was a small civil wedding. We were both doing a big wedding, and neither of them went so well. Perhaps it was superstition, or just the realization that we didn't want to go through it all again, or maybe a combination of both. But we stood before the judge at City Hall and said our vows, committing ourselves to each other and only each other. Gina and I didn't go on a honeymoon right after we got married because we couldn't afford it, but we ended up going to Hawaii for a week about 2 years later. Not wanting to mix up memories, Taylor and I took a cruise to Jamaica for our honeymoon. We took a ton of photos throughout the day. Judging by the looks from our neighbors, some disapproving but mostly positive, our activity was not as private as we would have liked. Taylor wanted children in the worst possible way. I could have done without them since I already had Natalie, but I loved being a dad and was happy to do it again for her. But we haven't started to specifically pursue this yet. Taylor used this fact to her advantage and gave me a good time. I was sitting at home, taking a couple of days off after finishing another successful project. At this point, we had been married for about 6 months. Taylor was away somewhere, but she didn't tell me where. I heard her car pull into the garage, and, as always, I was glad that she was home. But everything changed when she burst through the door, connecting the garage to the living room. "You son of a bitch," she yelled at me. This was not what I expected, and I immediately went on the defensive. "What's the matter, baby? I can't believe you did this to me." I was stunned at what this could be about. Taylor hasn't had any trust issues lately, but I figured she saw something that she might have misinterpreted. I stood up and started to walk away from her, a little afraid that she might attack me. "Baby, what are you talking about? It's like you don't know what I'm talking about. You did this to me, and you did it on purpose. Don't try to pretend." "Honey, I'm not pretending. I just don't understand what you're talking about." "Oh, you're trying to pretend to be ignorant. I don't know what I did, honey, so I won't admit anything. Try to be honest, Henry, and I think you'll understand." I was starting to get very upset. I couldn't imagine what I might have done, or even what she might think I had done. Tired of the chase, I finally stopped and let her catch me. "Baby, please tell me what's going on." She hit me very gently on the chest, and then looked me in the eyes with an expression like I had just stepped on her puppy. She completely hooked me. You made me a baby, you bastard. Her face broke into the most beautiful, amazing smile I've ever seen, but it still took me a minute for the words to sink in because I was expecting some kind of accusation. What? Are you? Are you pregnant? 2 months, baby. I just came from the doctor. I picked her up and spun her around, excited about the good news. In fact, when we talked about it, and it was just a theory or a plan, I didn't mind, but now that it was a reality, I was ecstatic and couldn't wait to have a child with the woman I love. Taylor. Having never been pregnant, I didn't know what it was like, but I knew I didn't feel right, weak and dizzy, sometimes a little nauseous, just generally out of sorts. My first thought was a brain tumor. A bit extreme, I know, but in my mind I thought that maybe fate was waiting for me to finally be happy before taking that happiness away again. After Jimmy, I sometimes wondered if God had something against me. When Dr. Markley walked into the office with a smile on her face, I just thought it was good news. Maybe the flu, but at least something mild. When she placed the bottle of prenatal vitamins on the table, and I heard the word pregnant, I was overcome with joy that I cannot express. Having a child with the man I loved was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. After I told Henry, we immediately went to Mom and Dad to tell them the good news. I was an only child, and they were already starting to worry that they wouldn't be able to spoil their grandchildren. We decided to have a little fun with them, give back a little Mom for letting me think that Natalie was Henry's girlfriend that time. Mom, Dad, Henry, and I want to tell you something. Please have a seat. This sounds serious. Dear, is everything all right? Mom asked. I pretended to be overcome with emotion and let Henry take over. He did a great job of filling his voice with emotion when he spoke. Taylor, I just got back from the doctor. It looks like she's contracted. Well, I guess you'd call it a parasite. Miss Ruth became a little angry. Oh, Taylor, honey, how did it happen? This is serious. This is very serious, Mom. I'll probably be sick for a while, and they expect me to put on a lot of weight. This is one of the side effects. Darling, everything will be fine. Can this be cured? Can they give you anything that will help? Not really. I just have to let it run its course. Doctors don't know everything. We can do some research and see what options we have. Did he give you the name of the disease? I think the medical term is pregnancy. Mom started writing it down before she realized what I said, then suddenly burst into tears of happiness and hugged us both. Dad, all this time, sat stoically. Mom usually speaks for both of them, but I saw how his eyes watered when he realized that he would soon become a grandfather. Henry. Taylor and I recently celebrated our wedding anniversary, and she stumbled around the house ready to explode while 8 months pregnant. She was even more beautiful, and even with her bloated belly, our amazing sex life didn't suffer. Life was good. We had just finished dinner and were about to sit down to watch a movie on Netflix when my phone rang. It was Natalie. Hello, Nat, how are you, dear? I asked. Daddy, can you come to the North City Medical Center right now? The tension was noticeable in her voice, and I instantly became wary. What happened, baby? Are you okay? At this moment, I felt Taylor tense up too. I'm fine, Dad. This is Mom. She had an accident. Everything is very bad. I relaxed a little and was slightly annoyed. Why was she calling me? Look, honey, I'm glad you've improved your relationship with your mom a little over the past few months, but that doesn't make her my problem. Now John is responsible for her. She paused, then almost in a whisper. Dad, John is dead. He also had an accident. I said the first thing that came to my mind, and then I was very ashamed of it. Is it true? Fine. But that still doesn't make your mother my problem. Wait, honey. I interrupted my conversation with Nat to quickly tell Taylor what was going on. She just nodded her head and went into the bedroom. Sorry, honey. Continue. I know it's not your problem, Dad. This is mine and I need your help. They ask me all kinds of questions and ask me to fill out a bunch of forms, and I don't know what to do. Savannah needs help too. She's trying to cope with her father's death, and she's having no more luck than I am. Okay, sweetie, hold on tight and I'll be there as soon as I can, but don't expect me to talk to her or even visit her. Okay, Daddy? I turned off my phone just as Taylor came out of the bedroom wearing her coat. Wait, Beauty, where are you going? Aren't we going to the hospital to help Natalie? I'm going. You will stay here. I won't take you pregnant into this petri dish with bacteria and infections. But baby, I want to be close to you and Nat. I know, honey, but I don't want you to catch anything. It'll be boring and you'll feel uncomfortable. But I promise to keep in touch with you, okay? She pouted, but relented. Okay, but better keep me informed as if I were standing next to you. I got to the hospital and went up to Gina's floor. I stopped at the nurse's desk and was directed to the waiting area where I found Natalie. She hugged me tightly and brought me up to date. It looks like Mom will survive, but she will have physical therapy. She broke her left leg and arm, but otherwise her injuries were mostly superficial. Do you know what happened? An officer is with her now. He said that he would fill me in on the matter after he talked to my mother. A few minutes later, the policeman left Gina's room. Miss Weston, thank you for your patience. It sounds like your mom is very lucky. She will not face any charges as she was just a passenger. Excuse me, what are the charges? And who are you? This is my daughter, and I'm helping her with paperwork for my ex-wife. Well, preliminary toxicology reports indicate that Mr. and Mrs. Hartman were both under the influence, although actual levels have not yet been determined. Again, since Mrs. Hartman was a passenger, she will not face any charges, and since Mr. Hartman is deceased, obviously nothing can be done about him. However, there could be a civil issue with the other owner of the car, so she should be prepared. I'd like to clarify. Officer, just so we're clear on what you're talking about, John and Gina were both apparently drunk or on something, and they got into an accident for which they were at fault. Is this something like this? Yes, sir. What about the people from the other car? There have been no deaths, fortunately, but there have been a few concussions and broken bones, and, of course, their car is totaled. It will depend on how good the insurance is. Hartmanoff. Okay, officer. Thank you very much. I'll go check on my mom. I sat down to wait to see what would happen next as Natalie walked into her mom's hospital room. I sent Taylor a quick message and then pondered the turn of events. Part of me thought that this would never have happened if she was still with me since I didn't drink alcohol. But partly, I felt sorry for her. No matter how she behaved towards me in the end, her husband was dead, and now she faced golden years without the men she loved. I wondered if she would try to find someone else or settle into a single life with friends and as a mom waiting to be a grandma. She will have to work, which she only did for a short time, right after college and before she and I got married. She'll probably have to sell the house, and she'll probably want to, too. I can't imagine this house being anything more than a reminder of the two men she no longer has. My thoughts were interrupted by Natalie's appearance from her mother's room. She wants to see you, Daddy. I told her I would ask, but to expect the answer to be no. It was strange. I carried this anger towards her for so long, and suddenly, at that moment, it disappeared. I mean, why the hell was I still angry? I still had my wonderful daughter. I still had a great job that paid well and that I loved doing. I had a wonderful wife and a new daughter who would be born soon. What Gina did is in the past, and it can be argued that she is paying for it now. Of course, it was painful to go through this, but in the end, everything turned out for the better. At that moment, I left it all behind me and out of my mind. I'll go talk to her. Surprise at my answer was noticeable on Natalie's face, but it soon broke into a smile, and I think she also realized that I had turned the corner. I walked into Gina's room, and she responded with a weak smile, probably due to her lack of strength and the medications they were giving her. Henry, you've come. Thank you. How are you feeling, Gina? Physically, I think I'll be fine. I'm emotionally broken, although you can't tell from me because of all this chemistry. You know John is gone, don't you? I heard, yes. I'm sorry about that. Is it true? Okay, at first I wasn't sorry, but in the last few minutes I realized that I didn't care about the person all this bitterness was turning me into, so I let it go. So yes, I'm sorry you lost John, and I know you'll need help to get through this, but I want you to know that Taylor and I will be here to help. It would be great. I hope to one day meet your beautiful wife. Natalie told me that she will soon have a new little sister. You must be excited. Yes, very. Henry, when it comes down to it, I'm sorry for what I did to you. I had built up a marriage with John in my mind to believe that he would be amazing, but it was an ordinary marriage. I loved him and he loved me, but I already had this with you and I regret what I did. I think deep down I knew that you would never share me, and that would give me a reason to be with John, but at the same time, it would be your fault. I was stupid and I owe you an apology. Consider that everything is forgotten, and you are forgiven, Gina. This is already in the past. Friends? Definitely. I think this is just the first of big changes for me. With John gone, I'll have to sell the house and find a job. I do not know how. I don't have any skills. You just focus on getting better. When the time comes, just call me. I'll help you get a job somewhere. That would be great. Henry, thank you. I said goodbye, wanting to get back to Taylor as soon as possible. All the paperwork with Gina was done, so all that was left was to get her well. I walked out of the room and saw that Savannah had joined Natalie. I walked over and hugged her. How are you holding up, Savvy? I'm fine, Uncle Henry. I could use some help with the paperwork, but other than that, I'm fine. I will help you. Let's go. Paperwork in the morgue was different from working with living patients. I'd never handled paperwork for a dead person before, but we got through it by talking as we went along. I know you haven't spoken to your father for a long time. I hope it wasn't because of me. No, it was because of my mother. I think she wished Dad would find someone else, but her family and her friends, you guys, were all so important to her. She wouldn't have been upset that your father did this, separating you from your Aunt Gina. He disrespected her and her memory, and I cannot forgive that. He couldn't have done it if Gina didn't agree. But now it's all over. If you need anything, Savvy, call me. Well, since you started talking about it, I turned out to be an orphan, and therefore I need new parents. May I interest you and Aunt Taylor? Darling, it would be an honor for us. In fact, you're coming home with me and Nat tonight. I think we should all be together. And that's exactly what we did. When we finally finished at the hospital, we all met at the house, and just for fun, as I walked Savannah through the front door, I announced to my very pregnant wife, "It's a girl, Henry." I just turned 50 years old, and I'm amazed at the changes that have happened in my life over the past 9 years since that morning Gina asked me to play and share. Savannah and Natalie got married. I married them both off. Natalie married her longtime boyfriend, Michael. They live in an apartment nearby, and Natalie has just announced that she is 3 months pregnant. Savannah met a guy on her first day at her new job, and it was love at first sight. They got married after only knowing each other for 2 months, but they have 2 children and love each other very much. The kids call Taylor and me Grandma and Grandpa. I got Gina a job as a personal assistant for one of our competitors. I interviewed her and gave her a good recommendation, but he told me that hiring her was one of the best decisions of his life. They finally got married last year after Gina had resisted the idea of a 3rd trip to the altar for some time. Taylor and I are very happily married, and we have made her dream of having a big family come true. Not only do we have Nat, Savvy, and their husbands and grandchildren, but Taylor spent virtually the entire first 5 years of our marriage pregnant. Samantha is 8, Jasmine is 7, Nathan is 5, and baby Carmen just turned 4. Taylor is a wonderful mother, and I love her more and more every day. But she and I were too fertile together, so after Carmen was born, we had the procedure done. Miss Ruth is still with us, but 6 years ago, we lost Richard. He lived to see the birth of his first 2 grandchildren, and for that we are all very grateful. Miss Ruth still lives in her home, and we visit her every day to make sure she is being cared for. Soon we will sell both houses and move to a larger house together. Since the children are growing every day, we will need space. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.